Okay, we continue discussing Ilchot Shabbat. So yesterday we spoke about how at the time of the Torah and into the Greek period when the wars of the Maccabees against the Greeks, there was no clarity as to what is exactly forbidden on Shabbat. And people tended to become more and more extreme, not eating hot food on Shabbat, not even saving a life on Shabbat. And the rabbis wanted us to put order into this whole system and to create a list that everybody will be able to easily refer to. What they did was, and we'll see later, but we have to go through the list as we have it, they took a couple of lists that already existed. Meaning for the people who were in business or in the business of making things, let's say the three main lists that we have in the Mishnah have to do with baking bread, with making garments, and handling leather. So those three things were already. If you, for example, you became an apprentice for a farmer, and you say, "What is it I have to do?" He says, "You have to sow, plow, reap, bind sheaves, thresh, winnow, separate stones from wheat, grind, sift, etc. Knead the dough." Okay, if you're going to work with a fabric manufacturer, you say, "What is needed in order to make wool?" You say you have to shear the sheep, then you have to wash it, then you have to beat it with sticks to separate the threads. You have to spin, you have to weave, etc., etc. So now, how do we know that this is true? Like, this is a theory. What I'm saying now, it's a theory that says that up to a certain point there was no clear order of what is allowed, what is not allowed. People more or less went with intuition or with tradition of what the local rabbis said, and at a certain point the rabbis were trying to create a uniform system that everybody would follow. So they start creating categories of work. So, for example, if you say like that, one of the stages in the process of making bread is planting or sowing, then you would put everything under that has resemblance to this work under this category. It would be one forbidden work. So, for example, watering plants will be under planting because you're helping the growth of the plant. If there's a Melakhot, there's a category that they name harvesting, which already appears in the Torah. Then anything that is done that cuts a living thing from the ground, a plant, could be a leaf, anything like that, would be considered harvesting. So that would be easier for people to remember. They said if you only remember 39 categories and you refer to them constantly, that would be easy for you to know what is forbidden and what is permitted. And this list of 39 Melakhot, called 39 Melakhot Shabbat, appears in Masechet Shabbat in the Mishnah. Now, the tractate or Masechet Shabbat in the Mishnah has 24 chapters, and the list appears in the 7th chapter, which in itself is a problem, because if you have the list and you know what is forbidden and what is permitted, right? Put it in the very first Mishnah, the very first chapter, and say these are the works, the categories that are forbidden on Shabbat. Now let me break it down for you. Word number 1, details. Word number 2, details. That's not the order of the Mishnah. The Mishnah starts with the laws of carrying. And then,
but it takes the majority of the.
But the majority of the discussion is about carrying. Almost
a tiny bit on the rest.
Yes. So the first chapter speaks about carrying. Then there seems to be some logic because it's carrying from the
you mean carrying something?
Yeah, from the public property to the private property, or vice versa. And then the Mishnah speaks about the preparations for Shabbat, which makes sense. That's fine. That it is a logical order of talking about what is permitted to do before Shabbat, how do you have to prepare for Shabbat. But already in those 6 chapters leading to the presentation of the list, we already speak about certain works that are forbidden on Shabbat itself. Meaning that if the first 6 chapters would only be about the preparations for Shabbat, that's fine. But since the preparation of Shabbat include references also to things that are forbidden on Shabbat, it is much more logical to first present the list. What are the examples of the things that are mentioned that are Melakhot or forbidden on Shabbat? First, the very first Mishnah, Yetziot Shabbat, 2 shana 4 bifnim, 2 shana 4 b'chutz. The first Mishnah of Masechet Shabbat speaks about a situation, something that happens on Shabbat itself, after Shabbat started, and a poor man comes to ask for food from Baal Habayit, from his host or a donor, and he gives him food, but the poor man is standing in the public property, and the man is standing inside his house. Mutawasu. So I don't even know yet that there is such a melacha, that there is such a category. Tell me that. Then in chapter 2, Babei Madlikin, which we read every Friday night, there's a halacha there. המכבה את הנר מפני שהוא מתיירא מפני גויים, מפני ליסטים, או מפני רוח רע, או בשביל החולה שישן, פטור. כי חס על הנר, כי חס על השמן, כי חס על הפתילה, חייב. רבי יוסף פוטר בכולן, חוץ מן הפתילה, מפני שהוא עושה פחם. This is the whole Mishnah. What does it say? It says that if you put out the candle on Shabbat itself, so now we already talk about a category of work which is forbidden on Shabbat, but is not written in the Torah, right? Because Torah says, "Lo teva'aru esh b'chol moshavotechem." You should not start a fire. What about putting out a fire? Is it forbidden or not? I don't know. The Mishnah will say in the list that it is forbidden, but in the Talmud there's a huge discussion. There's a very, very serious discussion over this prohibition of putting out fire on Shabbat, because it is called melacha she'ena tzricha legufa. That you don't need the outcome. It's the kind of work that you are causing the cessation of something that's going on. So it's sort of like a passive thing. Whenever you do a work like mav'ir, let's say starting the fire, your aim is to create heat or to cook food, etc. When you sow, then you're planting for something to grow. When you're stitching, weaving, all these are making something. But mechabe, to put out something, fire, you're not doing anything. You're not creating anything. The exception would be when you cool down hot iron. So if you take a rod of metal and throw it into the water, the hot rod is considered fire, and when you throw it into the water, you're making it stronger. It's called in Hebrew hisum. That makes the metal more solid, right? Rigid.
By changing.
Right.
By changing the molecular, right? So it's called in Hebrew. It's called hisum. I think this is a process that's still done today. So they say because here you have an end product, that would be the case of putting out a fire where you're transgressing. The same thing. If you put firewood and then you put out the fire, you have benefit from putting out the fire because you have created coals that you could use for the future. So now you go back to the Mishnah. This is what the Mishnah says. If you put out the candle because you're concerned about mipnei goyim, there could be attackers, non-Jews, meaning attack safety because of other nations who are going to attack you. Mipnei listim, because of robbers. Mipnei ruach hara, because of a mental illness. Some people are afraid of light, and you need to put it out. Or b'shvil ha'chorei sheishan patur, or there's a sick person who needs darkness to fall asleep, and you put out the fire, you're patur, you're exempt from punishment. Meaning it's forbidden, you're not allowed to do it, but if you did it, and it's strange, right? Because we think today if someone put out a candle, wow, that's no, batul. It's not didn't commit any offense because it's called melacha she'ena tzricha legufa. There's no end product. Kehas al haner, kehas al hashemen, kehas al petila hayav. But if you did it in order to save oil, or to prolong the life of the wick, or to protect the vessel itself, which used to be a clay vessel containing oil, hayab. One is punishable because there is a positive outcome from the work. And Rabbi Yosef poter bechulam, chutz min hapetila. According to Rabbi Yosef, all of them are exempt except for when he cares about the wick, because when you put out the wick, it burns better next time. So there is there is a direct benefit. However, all this discussion only makes sense in the context of knowing that putting out fire on Shabbat is forbidden, and that's not written until the 7th chapter. That is a big problem. But not only that, let's go quickly.
Also the other concept, like patur and asur.
Right, patur and asur. There are other things that we should know, and we don't know. The interesting thing is that, and we'll go through the list more in detail later, is you go through the 39 Melakhot in the second Mishnah of chapter 7, and they are divided, as I said. First, there are 11 types of work that are related to baking bread. Then there are 9 that are related to shearing wool and making fabric. And then there are several others that have to do with hunting and preparing leather products and parchment. And finally, boneh, soter, mechabe, mavreir, makeh, patish, motzi. 6 that are miscellaneous, don't fall under any specific category. But when we go back to the one that has to do with leather, we have this hatzad tzvi, hunting a deer, hashohato, slaughtering it, amafshito, skinning the deer, hamolho, salting it, and then to make it softer, v'hame'abedet oro, and processing the leather, or tanning. Now, and that is what was done for making parchment. You just asked me about that. So it was to make parchment. Now, that the Gemara says, what is the difference between molho v'me'abedet oro? Salting and processing. It's one and the same, right? What is wrong with that? So why do you write them as 2 separate issues? So the Gemara says that it is indeed one work only, one category. And they say, take out the word molho, salting it, and put instead mesartet, one who marks lines on the parchment with a ruler. This is a huge problem. We are talking about a list, a categorical list, right? The 39 melachot, that probably, if it was tradition, it was memorized generation after generation. How come one work is taken out and the other one is put in? That's not something that happens you do so easily. And Rambam, Maimonides in his commentary, explained this. He says the rabbis commented in the Talmud that salting and processing are not 2 different types of categories, because salting is part of processing. But the author of the Mishnah spelled out salting in order to teach us that salting falls under processing. It doesn't make sense. So why don't you break other categories down and give me the subcategories? Here you are just talking about the main categories. So why was the other one ruling? Why was it omitted? The author of the Mishnah didn't bother to mention ruling, making lines on the parchment, because he said later on, he writes, one of the other categories is kutev, is writing. So for him it was filed under writing. Again, it's a very serious problem, because what if someone didn't know that this is what the author of the Mishnah was thinking? Someone wants to learn the Melakhot Shabbat, the laws, and he looks at the Mishnah. It doesn't mention anything about ruling lines on parchment. So is it possible that for hundreds of years, between the writing of the Mishnah and the commentary in the Talmud, that is the first time that it appears, hundreds of scribes all over Israel who knew that you cannot write on Shabbat, but wanted to make some progress, said, okay, Shabbat, I'm going to sit and mark lines on all the rolls of parchment that I have, because they didn't know that it's written. It's not in the Mishnah. And indeed, Rabbi Yom Tov Heller, Yom Tov Lipman Heller, who wrote to Sfot Yom Tov in the 16th century, he writes a little more harsh language than Maimonides. He says, "Ufashar hatana bizchirata b'shat haktiva v'samota me'inei hakotev." He says it was a failure of the author of the Mishnah, and he says pasha, it's criminal negligence, because pasha, it's criminal negligence. He says he failed to mention this melacha, this category, because he filed it in his memory under a kotev. So this already, and we have to go deeper into this whole list, but it shows us the crack in the wall of claiming that this list is what we call Torah le Moshe Sinai that came all the way down from Har Sinai. We'll continue more B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow.